Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Pitt Panther Preview Show presented by the Arsenal Cider House, home of Western Pennsylvania's first and best cidery. With 3 great locations, including South Hills Tracks Farm, which is where we are currently and each and every week. Also the Lawrenceville, which is the original location, and their north location in Wexford at Sorgel's Farms. Each location has a fantastic and interesting decor and feel to it. So, get first chance you get out to one of those locations. They're wonderful. With 8 or 9 different ciders and wines on tap, including the normals, which is the Picket Bone Dry, Fighting Alec, Archibald's Ado, Negley's Nectar, which is peach. And this week's, they got Ramrod's Rhubarb, which I think that's been around for a little while, but I had it for the first time. I tried a sample, and I can tell you it is amazing. And then, of course, the Pizzazz Dry Honeycrisp Apple, which you can only get by the glass instead of glass and growler. So come out and try all of those if you haven't had a chance. And, of course, Colonel Smithton's Sour Cherry. My name's Jason, as normal, and I'll be your host for this evening. Along with me is my sidekick, Zach Kaminsky. It was another tough week. It was another rough week. Nothing. I don't think either one of us expected it to go down the way it did. Kudos to Syracuse and how well they played. We'll get into it more. I have some general observations I want to that I want to get to, but Zach, give me this is where you come in. Give me your first initial thoughts on what you saw last week.
What's going on, Jason? Great to be back here at the Arsenal Cider House. Favorite time of the week. I agree with that. To be frank here, something I look forward to each and every week, to talk a little Pitt football with you here at the Arsenal Cider House at Tracks Farm. Definitely, excuse me, definitely a gut-wrenching loss last week at the Carrier Dome. Real disappointing. As we had said going into the game last week, it was pretty much a must-win.
Oh, if they wanted to salvage anything, it was a must-win.
Pretty much a must-win. Huge game on the schedule for your Pitt Panthers heading into last week. And real unfortunate as we look back on the game last week. Thought that they might come out ahead. Obviously, our predictions were wrong, but thought they would come ahead. It just didn't turn out that way. Had a couple injuries during the game. I don't know. It just seemed like they really couldn't get much going. Couldn't get a key stop when it mattered most.
Not late.
Held out hope that they would get the ball back late and they could make a little push for it. I don't know, man. This was a game they really needed to have. One going into the game having one conference loss, no wins. You really thought they still had a chance. Now down 0-2 in the conference. It's tough. It really is like a punch to the gut when I use that as a metaphor to describe this week. And I don't know, man. It's just it's sad, but it's also you're kind of asking the what if game. There's a lot of things that could have went right, a lot of things that could have went wrong. A lot of topics that we will discuss today on the show, but just seemed. We had a couple drives that were good there. Had a couple drives that didn't transpire to, touchdowns, field goals, points of that nature. It's been the story all season. Too many, again, 3 and outs. Lack of running game. Lack of great offensive line play. Injury to our quarterback Max Brown in the game that led again to the play of Ben DiNucci in the second half of the game. So
he played okay.
He played okay, but again, it's disappointing, and hopefully we can start to right the ship here this week and get back on the winning ways. And it's been a tough go for the Pitt Panthers as of late. You have another tough test that we'll talk about later in the show with number 20 North Carolina State Wolfpack coming into Heinz Field with extra rest. But we'll see.
That one in, didn't you?
We'll see. Yeah, Hey, coming off a big win at home against Louisville, so I don't know. What was your perspective?
Something. A couple of takeaways from the game last week. One, you talked about a lack of run game, and there was definitely a lack of run game. But one of the reasons there was a lack of running game is Syracuse's ability to tackle. That might have been the great thing about it is I watched some highlights of them prior to the game start, because I wanted to get an idea of what they were about, and I watched some highlights, and I watched like a half hour of 2 or 3 games each, and I can tell you they didn't tackle that well all season long until that game. It never seemed like they missed a tackle. Call that bad luck, call that lack of effort on Pitt's behalf, call it whatever you want. But every time you turned around when there looked like there could have been a big play, it was squashed by a great tackle. It was squashed by guys who were stringing plays out, and they weren't letting people behind them at all. And kudos to them. You tip your hat to them, because that's just nothing but fundamental football, and they played better fundamentally than Pitt did. The quarterback play left a lot to be desired in that game. In the first half, I know Max got hurt, and you never want to see that. I would have been fine if he'd have finished the season with 7 or 8 wins, and he would have had a good year, because in every interview you've ever seen him in, he's so solid as a not just a kid as an interview, but as a person. He just seems like he's got his head on straight. You never want to see a kid's career end like that, college career, because there's no pro career ahead of him. So his football career is over. But in that first half, unlike what you saw last week, in that first half it looked like he was trying to place the ball instead of throw the ball. And because of that, he was putting too much air under it, so he wasn't catching guys in stride. He was giving the defender too much of an opportunity to make plays, or the ball wasn't close. From that side of it, the quarterback play left a lot to be desired. In the same sense, though, he had no running game, because once again the offensive line did nothing. Jordan Whitehead broke a big one. That was impressive. Outside of him, you really didn't see any movement. Shantez Mosh, you didn't find out he wasn't going to play until, in typical Pitt, and I'll call it Pitt Narduzzi style. Instead of Pat, we'll call it Pitt Narduzzi style. You don't find any of this out until like 3 seconds before the kickoff. That he wasn't going to start. He's suspended indefinitely for God knows what. So, you pile that up with the injury, and then there's several injuries that happened during the game. It was a wonder they got back to 27-24. I mean, they showed fight. I give them credit for that. They didn't give up. They didn't quit. That defense played really well in the first half, but in the second half they got worn down, and that to me was more of a sign of how. One of my keys last week was what? Win the third quarter. Quit losing third quarters. And what happened again? They lost the third quarter. They went out, kicked a field goal, but then after that, nothing. And then Syracuse just ran on them up and down the field.
Yeah, I think that Pitt doesn't really ride the momentum very well. Had a lead at halftime. Didn't come out gunning in the second half. Like you had said, quarterback play was a little bit suspect. Max Brown played, not saying well enough to win the game, but he played okay early on. Running game was not there again. We talked about going into the season, we had a plethora of running backs and we were just kind of wondering who was going to play. And given what's, situation, circumstance, whatever have you, the hot hand, doesn't seem like anyone's willing to take that, whether it be on the field or off the field. No one wants to grab that position. And, receivers played okay, but again, offensive line kind of dictates how this team plays and how they're going to be going forward. As you said, they got nothing from the running game, and I kind of think that's again where the key problem is here for this offense. I think, like you had said, the defense got worn down, had no answer for Syracuse in some of those drives in the second half, and honestly, I'd contribute that to a couple things. Mainly that being, like you had said, worn down. But when the offense is going out and they're getting too many times this season on offense 3 and out, there's only so many times you can ask your defense to stop a team. Now, there was a ton of 3 and outs on both sides in the first half. But the second half, it's just they get worn down, they get tired, and I thought overall, again, the defense is taking another step forward, but the offense is taking 2 steps back so far this year.
I agree with that.
A lot of people are saying Narduzzi is a guy who's a defensive coach, and where is the defense? And my answer is this team is still young. This team is, he's in year 3, but these are now his players playing. This isn't Paul Chryst players. These are his players that are now getting playing time. Guys like DeMar Hamlin, guys like Bryson Gardner, guys like Taron Coleman, who made a start on Saturday. Seeing a lot of guys of, Salim Brightwell, Chase Pine, Reynolds. The whole defensive line is all new from last year. So, it's going to take time. Might be growing pains. But again, I think that the defense has taken 1 step forward and offense has taken, a few steps back, so to speak. And, now with a quarterback who we thought that the quarterback controversy was fixed, and for at least for a week, Max Brown is out, now obviously for the remainder of the season with half the season to go, and Ben DiNucci's the quarterback at the moment. I don't know, man. I'm really just starting to think that a lot of things are starting to pile up. There's a lot of off the field issues. There's a lot of injury issues. I don't know. It just seemed like last year this Pitt team had a lot of the it factor. You knew that whoever they were playing, they had the mojo to be in the game. No matter if it was Clemson number 2 on the road or if it was Duke at home. You knew that they were going to be in the game somehow, some way, and they would make it work. Home or away, they would make it work. And it just seems like this year, you could be as optimistic as you want to be about this team, but you're really your head's starting to tell you the other way. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but we got to press on, and we got a half a season to hopefully right the ship and see where it goes from there.
All is not lost. I mean, they're 2-4, but it is a tall task for them to figure out any way to do better than.
Well, they sit at 2-4 halfway through the season. They're sitting at 2-4. I know my goal for the season was to come out of the ACC Coastal. Obviously, I think that
is not going to happen.
I don't think that it's not going to happen. I'm an optimistic person here. I had said from the beginning that I thought that whoever was going to win the ACC on Pitt's side, the Coastal, was going to be a 2-loss team. So theoretically, I guess with my prediction, Pitt with 2 losses, if they win out, they might need some help. But I do think that you're going to see some teams falter here. Virginia Tech still has to play Miami. That's a loss for either team. Miami, Georgia Tech this week, that's a loss for a team. So there's still some losses to be had, but it is going to be an uphill battle. And I think that at this point, we should right the ship and, obviously qualify first for a bowl game. And then, see if we can get to the 8-4 mark and see where that puts us.
And then go from there, absolutely. It's funny, you mentioned the halfway point. That's a great segue because one of the things that I wanted to touch on today as I sent over to you earlier, was we're 2-4. How did they get here? And I guess that's the best way to put it. It started early with suspensions. We've had, of course, coaching turnover. Not head coach for once, but the offensive coordinator, and that's turned into a bigger story to me than I thought it was going to be. I really, honestly, they had Matt Canada's plan in place. I thought for sure that they'd be able to pick that up, but the fact is, I honestly believe they had the wrong. They've chose the wrong transfer to run an offense like that. So it's kind of shoehorning a guy who's not a scrambling style quarterback into a role where you got to be able to run a little, pass a little, and do everything. So you got coaching turnover, you got suspensions, now you got injuries, issues riddled all over the place. You finally get George Aston back 6 plays into the year, and now he's out. They're not saying for the season, but Lord knows when we're going to see him again, because you don't get updates the way like in the NFL or whatever. Pitt has that locked down. They just don't talk about it. I mean, we didn't find out about the loss of Shantez Moss till literally 10, 15, 20 minutes before the game, and found out that he was suspended indefinitely. I don't know what's going on, but the fact is, I respect the fact that Coach Narduzzi has chosen to be a hardliner and run a clean ship and a good ship. With that said, thus far it's crippled him this season. It really has. Between that and some of the changes, and the injuries, it's really crippled him. And and it's not. And I'm definitely not going to sit here and tell you that they've lost because of injury. That's part of it. But when you shuffle everything together, it no longer becomes an excuse. It becomes fact. And there's analysts and there's people out there that want to talk about, you're making up excuses why a guy is not winning in his third year as a coach. But the fact is, this season couldn't have been set up any worse for him to win with everything that has happened. So the fact that we are where we are, it's frustrating, yeah, but I get it. Where they go from here is the question. That's the question.
Well, I would agree with you. It is disappointing to be sitting at 2-4 at the halfway mark here at the halfway point with 6 games to go, and it doesn't get much easier going forward. I mean, they got number 20, North Carolina State, coming into Heinz Field.
The schedule's been brutal, by the way.
It's been brutal. I mean, they have them coming in. They still got to play Virginia Tech, who's a ranked team. And they still have Miami, who's a ranked team, to come into Heinz Field. So they still have 3 of the remaining 6 games are against ranked opponents.
Yep.
When you look at the schedule, how it's been put together so far, I mean, 5 out of the 12 games are going to be against not even just top 25 opponents, but top 20, top 15 opponents. I mean, that's a lot to ask for any team in college football, but let alone a team that's going through, some transformations at key positions and being a young team. And I know people don't want to use the, excuse, we're young. We're a young team. We got our young defense. We got a young players at key positions. I mean, I get all that, and I understand it's not an excuse. But at the same time, like we've said before, is that these are finally his players. Yeah, and I'm kind of over the transfer quarterback. You need to stop relying on that.
I don't think
they've been lucky. They've been lucky in the past with Tom Savage coming in here and playing for 1 year. They got lucky with Nate Peterman, who I think they had thought that he was going to be a backup and kind of pushing Chad Voidick and kind of create some competition and, light a fire under Chad Voidick, and it worked in their favor with Nate Peterman.
Chad Voidick right now.
Yeah, and it's just, they tried to go it again. What we have here, and I think this is how they kind of went into it, is what do we have here at the quarterback position? What we have is we have a kid we have basically all inexperienced. They knew it was going to be a kind of a bridge year, as Neil Huntington would say, but it was a bridge year. And, hey, we got a guy out there that's going to come from USC, and he's a fifth-year guy, and he can play, and he didn't know the playbook. I mean, and he was, in my opinion, their best option, but now he's hurt. Now they're kind of, okay, now what do we got? You burn a red shirt last week with, Jesus, can you keep your helmet on? I mean, it's just, stuff like that is just inexcusable.
Well,
and I understand it happens. It's football, contact sport, it happens. But, to burn somebody's red shirt like that.
But that was telling.
It was. And I think that from what we've talked about in the previous, episodes of this show and what we've seen and what we've heard is, Kenny Pickett has been the best quarterback in practice. He's been getting reps with the first team. He's the best guy going forward. Hey, maybe it's a sign. Maybe he is raring to go, and maybe we do need to see more of him. And like Narduzzi said, that we are going to see him. Now it's a matter of how much. Do I think that this week he's obviously not starting and DiNucci starting? Do I think that we might see him a little bit? I think we might. If the game is close, does he stay with the hot hand? Does he stay with DiNucci? Sure. But you've had that problem. You've had suspensions. It's just the whole season has not felt like we've had any sort of continuity, consistency. It's all. Okay, I'll be quite frank when I say this. It's getting old. It seems like you win a game, you get hope. You lose 2 games, you look good, there's hope. Wow. You beat a Rice team and you beat them convincingly, there's hope. Then you drop this one. Now I feel like we're back at square one. But the suspensions have gotten way out of hand. This team is not done itself favors. And like you said, Narduzzi wants to he wants to run a tight ship here, and I get it. And I commend him for that. That's the way that he wants to run his program, and he thinks it's going to be beneficial down the end. But like you said before, Shantez Moss, he doesn't play the first game. We wondered where he was. Okay, he was suspended. Now all of a sudden, he looks like he's the running back going forward, and now he's suspended again. It's just like, when does it end?
I agree.
And Whitehead misses the first, 3 games?
Yep.
And now he's your best offensive player?
Right.
Okay, so there's a question there. What do we do with him? Does he play on offense? It's just it's getting a little bit old, and I guess that's where we're at. Where we have basically the story of the first half is quarterback controversy, suspensions have riddled the team, and injuries have riddled the team.
And it's as far as burning the red shirt, Coach Narduzzi was asked about that practically right out the gate, and he said that obviously he wouldn't change anything, and as I said, it was telling. And the reason I say it was telling is because this week he talked about how Kenny he. Quote unquote, this was impressive when I heard him say this. Kenny's mentally as far along as any freshman in his role in the country.
And he was farther along, he said, than DiNucci as a freshman.
Yes, as a freshman. That to me is night and day. That explains everything.
So this kind of answers my question from last week that we posed, is who is Narduzzi's guy?
It's Kenny Pickett.
So to me, and I don't want to say the season is lost, don't get me wrong, but it seems to me that
it is.
He got forced into a situation where he didn't really want to play Kenny Pickett this year.
Right.
And he had to, and I kind of feel like he was happy that he had to. So now it's kind of like, wait, we have he still has DiNucci, who's more prepared.
Right.
But does this mean that I kind of get the feeling that no matter how this game goes tomorrow, we might see Kenny Pickett start next week.
The Kenny Pickett era could start very quickly.
It's almost like he wants to give him like 2 weeks of preparation.
It's exactly.
And you know what?
Yep.
I'm okay with that, and I'm not trying to say, I don't want to see Ben DiNucci, but I do want to see what this kid.
I want to see the guy who's more prepared, the guy who's more talented.
And I quite frankly think that if Ben DiNucci's been in this system and he's been around for the last 3 years, 2 years,
can't complete a pass more than 20.
No, and I kind of think that I'm not trying to say that I wouldn't start Pickett tomorrow because I would, but I'm really starting to think that he just needs to play.
Yeah.
I mean, if he is your guy and we're getting indications that he's farther along and he's more mentally there than DiNucci or any other quarterback on the roster, and he's getting, even before Max Brown was hurt, he was getting reps for the first team.
Consider that technically the guy, McVitie, when he was asked about him, when Coach was asked about him this week, he said that obviously he's taking reps at special teams. So he's saying that Kenny is a little farther ahead at this point than McVitie. But the fact is, the fact that he has him taking reps in special teams, playing other roles, doing other things, tells you what they really feel and what they really picture him moving forward. Since that is the case, I honestly could see Ben DiNucci being a backup for the next 2 years very easily, and then seeing Kenny Pickett start. To me, it'd be reasonable to think he would start after this week, because to think after what we've seen thus far, not having Shantez Moss again, more than likely, and some of the injuries that have taken place, and having Ben lead your team against the number 20 team in the country, who's on a roll, by the way, it's normal to think they're not going to win this game. I mean, I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but we've been predicting wins all along, and to be honest, we couldn't have been farther from the truth in most cases. So to sit back and say they're going to win this week, I don't buy it. So if Ben DiNucci doesn't give you a chance to win the game, why wouldn't you start Kenny Pickett moving forward?
I mean, in my opinion, I would see what DiNucci has in the first 3 series of this game. If you get down 10, 14 points,
send him in.
Send him in. You might as well send him in. And I honestly think that, we talked about sparks in the last couple of weeks and what is going to give this team a spark. I kind of think that you just need to kind of hand over the keys of the car to him.
Yeah, just let him play his career out.
And I think that you're right. I think DiNucci is a guy who is – I don't think that he has enough skill set to upset a team.
He is the perfect guy
that is number 20 in the nation.
When your guy
he's a perfect backup. Yes, he's the perfect backup, and I think that I would like to see. I mean, it gives me all indication that when I hear people saying he was the best, Kenny Pickett was the best quarterback in the spring game. Mm-hmm. I was not there. I've seen glimpses of it. He was the best quarterback in the spring. He's getting reps with the ones.
Right.
He's mentally above where any freshman would be. Mm-hmm. I'm really starting to think that they kind of just need to play him at this point. You're sitting at 2-4. Let the kid grasp some experience. If DiNucci's not going to be your quarterback anyways going forward, then let's play them. Now, I guess, so then my question is how much do we see of Kenny Pickett tomorrow?
Oh, I firmly believe he's going to get at least a quarter. Honestly, I don't think there's any reason to not think, unless the game's close and Ben's playing okay. But if Ben played the way he did a couple of weeks ago in that first half, where it was 3 and out, and it was and everything was a screen or an out pattern because he kept checking himself down. If that's the case, and from all indication, from the people that I've talked to, it's not as much play calling, I'm finding out, even though it's questionable. Obviously, there's been some real question on the play calling. It's not. It's as much play call. It's as much as the quarterback making the decisions and checking things down, and going to his hot read instead of waiting for plays to develop. And since that's the case, well, I want a guy who's going to throw the ball downfield. Kenny's first only play was a 20-yard or 15-yard pass across the middle. Wow, that was the gutsiest thing we saw practically in the whole second half, except for the long pass that Ben threw.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think what you're going to see is if the game is close and DiNucci's doing a decent job of keeping that team in the game, I can see him staying in there. But at the same time, though, I'm not trying to say if things get out of hand one way or another, but also this is a desperation game.
Yep, totally.
I mean, we talked about last week being a desperation game, and in our hopes of winning the ACC, that was a desperation game. But if finishing 6-6 or getting to a bowl game, this is a must-win game. So if things don't start out the way that we want, you're going to see him in there.
And as well you should.
As well you should. That's the way that I kind of see it going this week, and I honestly think that we might see big things from Kenny Picket this week, and I'm excited to see that. Coming off a loss, I'm down, Jason. I'm down this week. We're down 2. Our record is 2-4. We're 0-2 in the conference. I'm down. Mm-hmm. So to see a bright spot and seeing a guy who is the future, I'm excited about that. I do hope that he gets in there. I do hope that he does well. I'm not saying that I hope that DiNucci does not do a well enough job to stay in the game, but I do want to see something from an up-and-comer and of the future. So that's the way that I look at it going forward. And again, we talked about the running game. Is Pitt's offensive problems as a whole, the quarterback play, the running back play, the overall, we say Sean Watson has not called good games. All these problems, does this come back to, and I've said this before, does all those problems and all the things that we're talking about, does that come back to the offensive line? Yeah,
it totally. And the more you talk about that, I didn't mean to jump in, but the more you talk about it, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Because they can't run. If this offense could run, then I don't think we are where we are at all. I don't think we're talking about Sean Watson. I don't think we're, what's his name ends up. He might not be injured. Max Brown may have time to throw. He may not be injured. It could be a completely different scenario. But the fact is we are where we are.
Well, and I agree with that. I think that the offensive line play has been so bad. I going into the season, I would have thought that it would have been a strength for us. You lost 2 key guys.
Fully expected it.
And we lost 2 key guys. I get that, but you also had guys with experience coming back, so it should have been a strength.
It's just not.
No, it's not. And I think that it is. It's not.
The line is a mess.
Well, it's a mess, and I think that you had guys, Brian O'Neill, Alex Bookser coming back again, another suspension that didn't help, but it was only for the Youngstown State game. But it hasn't helped. I mean, imagine if they were able to run the ball. Would they be sitting at 4-2?
Right.
Maybe Max Brown's not injured.
Minimum 3-3, and
minimum of 3-3.
Yep.
And that's the way that I look at it. Defense wouldn't be out on the field as much. We wouldn't have as many 3-and-outs every game as there's been. I mean, what was it, the one time whoever they played, I'm drawing a blank, Georgia Tech, when they had 7 3-and-outs in a row?
Yep.
I mean, the defense is forcing turnovers, and yet you're going 3-and-out. I just think that the offensive line has wrecked this season. If you can run, I feel like the season is totally different.
This is a team that was averaging over 200 yards on the ground per game last year, or close to it. And this year, they're not averaging 100 or close to that.
When Jordan Whitehead is your second, now there goes another question: how much of this success in the running game, if any, limited success, has been offensive line play and running backs.
Yeah.
I mean, Jordan Whitehead goes in there. Now, is his quickness so does that mean that they need to go away from a Quadri Olison and a Shantez Moss because he's suspended, but he is quick? Does that mean that Darren Hall needs to be your running back? Jordan Whitehead is getting that with his explosiveness. The holes aren't open for very long.
No.
So is it his speed?
And that, and it's funny you mentioned that, and that's something that the coach talked about. And when he even said it. He's like, I get asked about the offensive line every week. What is it? Is it blocking? Is it this? Is it that? He said it's everything. He's like, one play it's the offensive line not making a hole. The next time it's the quarterback not missing the read on when to call that run, and then it's the next time it's the running back missing the hole. He said it's a combination of all three.
Well, I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, when I see Whitehead in the offense, I mean it's night and day. I mean, it looks totally different, whether it's his skill set or it's just his speed. I think his speed actually has to play a part into it.
Yep.
And maybe Darren Hall might be an answer. He's a quick hitter. He has speed. With Shantez Moss out, and
where did he go? For the first couple of weeks you saw him.
Well, he caught the touchdown pass or had a touchdown against.
I mean, as a running,
he wasn't
back,
there last week.
No.
If I was an offensive coordinator, you can't rely on Jordan Whitehead. He needs to play defense. Now he has been okay at that, but honestly this week I'd go with Darren Hall. I think he'd be my running back. The holes aren't there very long. I think that he, with his speed, would create some sort of plays running up the middle. Jordan Whitehead, I mean, again, then there's a question. Do you use him more on offense? Can DeMar Hamlin and Bryson Gardner shoulder the load on defense? And do you look at having Whitehead do you look at having him on offense and taking away from the defense?
That's an interesting thought that you bring up there. That's an interesting thought. And it's I don't know. I don't know if you can do that against NC State. I would do it against. Well, and
let's not make them look like world beaters here, but still, they're number 20 in the nation. They got a great defensive line, and that's what scares me this week.
They're not world beaters. Nobody's saying they could beat Alabama, but the fact is, they're one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the ACC, I think, without question. And there's some good teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I think it's one of your 2 best conferences in college football.
Right now, I agree with that. I agree with that. It's because of the depth, too.
Yeah.
It's because of the depth. And that's something else, and we talked about the issues of the season. Everybody clamors, we want to play this great non-conference schedule. This is a year that great non-conference schedule didn't play to their advantage. It didn't play to their advantage at all. I mean, this is a year when you have a new offensive coordinator, you have a new and you make these schedules up years in advance, so it plays.
You don't know.
You don't know.
And honestly, I mean, we get back into the scheduling talk. Come on, I'd rather see a Pitt Penn State, no matter if Penn State is 3 in the nation or 162nd in the nation. I'd rather see them.
I'm not saying I would.
And the same with Oklahoma State, though. I'd rather see them on a schedule, a name team, than playing Youngstown State, Bowling Green, Ohio, and Tulsa.
Yeah, but you know something? And that's fine, but in a season like this, I really don't want to see a Penn State away, an Oklahoma State at home, and then a Georgia Tech away. You know what? I don't want to see that. I don't. And, and they, you can say they started out with a cupcake. They didn't. Youngstown State's got a good program right now, and that's not a terrible team. It's not. So thus far, they've played a difficult schedule, and they've been handicapped. So let's dive into this week a little bit. You talked about NC State not being all-world. That may be true, but they did outlast Louisville in Louisville, which is impressive. On a side note, before we get there, I wanted to bring this up, and this is a curveball to the show. We're all Pitt all the time, I know that, but The NCAA, did you see what they came out and did today with North Carolina?
No, I did not.
So the biggest academic scandal of all time, the NCAA determined they were going to levy no sanctions because they didn't feel like they had the authority to do so. So they had people making up. They were making up classes. Players weren't doing the work. They had other people doing the work in made-up classes during championship seasons. And the NCAA said, nope, we're levying no sanctions. None. But yet, and this is a double-edged sword for me. I'm not a Penn State fan. But then the NCAA wanted to levy horrific sanctions against Penn State for something that technically is what's the word I'm looking for? It's not an academic thing. It's not an NCAA thing. It's
not a cheating thing.
It's a legal thing. I mean, it's a.
That's more of the law.
Yeah, right. So they
didn't cheat to win.
That's right. So, and we have friends on both sides of the aisle here. This doesn't even make sense to me. This doesn't even make sense. So, I'm sitting. I'm driving, and all of a sudden, and I'm not a big fan of ESPN, but all of a sudden, I lift up my phone. I hear dan-dan-dan, dan-dan-dan, and I look down and it says NCAA levies no sanctions, and I'm like, that's unbelievable, because they felt like they did not have any authority to do so.
The whole cheating in sports thing is just getting out of hand. I mean, how many college football programs or basketball programs don't cheat? Is the question. Mm-hmm. Clearly, I don't think Pitt's cheating by any means. No. I mean, you kind of wonder, what are the... I mean, I don't know. The whole topic kind of irritates me, to be honest, because I feel like so many of these teams get away with so much, and now all of a sudden you kind of pull away wins. What do they care? They already won.
Right.
I mean, you won.
They already know they won.
And let's be honest, not trying to say that cheating is okay, but we know from being, I'm not trying to say it from a sales background, but you kind of have to find your edge. Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, there is some teams that play on the straight and narrow, and those teams should be rewarded or, whatever have you, but I don't know. I mean, the whole cheating thing, I don't think it's ever going to end. It's going to always be an issue.
It's always going to be an issue.
Someone's trying to cut the rules, break the rules any way they can. Hey, you pay for my grades, and I don't need to go to class, and that type of stuff. So
the minute you put a line in the sand, it doesn't matter what industry.
Someone's always over the
Somebody's
line.
willing to step over.
Yeah, and
that's just natural.
It's unfortunate, but everyone has to try to find a way to get players. Everyone has to try to find a way to get a certain player.
Our fearless leader just left, by the way.
Our
Dawn,
fearless leader,
the
producer here,
the
manager in charge, the producer.
She just walked out. She said, "I'm done. I'm out of here." Obviously, she was joking.
We're not done.
I didn't mean to interrupt. We're not done.
So you can leave. Leave the taps on. That's all that matters, really. Honestly, leave if you want. I'll shut the place down.
That's right. Well,
I don't know. I mean, it gets nauseating. I mean, okay, to take another step back, and we're not getting into this because this isn't the platform to do so, as everyone has been saying the last couple of weeks. But again, sports are supposed to be your getaway from everyday life. Sports are where I watch sports for entertainment. I don't sit here and I don't sign up for sports to sit here and talk about who's going to sit and who's going to kneel and who's going to stand for an anthem. I don't sit here and watch sports for that. I don't sit here and talk about sports. I don't sit here and talk about Pitt because of cheating and who cheated and who didn't cheat. We sat here to talk about the game, to talk about who's winning, who's losing. I mean,
I agree with that.
It gets old. It gets nauseating. It's not what we signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. Let's talk about North Carolina State, to be honest. It's just, you brought up a good point. We talked about it. No. It's totally acceptable. It's ridiculous. That's what it is.
It popped up,
it's
and I'm
stupid.
like, how does that happen?
How does that happen?
I
mean, it's just you scratch your head and wonder how things happen like that, and how it's, everyone makes it sound like, oh, my program's on the straight and narrow, but yet you're paying for some kid to get straight A's. You're paying for some kid to get a car so he can make his way down to Chapel Hill or wherever, I mean, seriously, it's just stupid. And then but that's what, you know what though?
Yep.
Take a step back, that's what makes, even though Pitt's 2-4, and even though their basketball program hasn't been where we are, you kind of wonder and you kind of relish those times where Pitt basketball may not have gotten to a Final Four, but yet they had good programs and they got to an Elite Eight because based on talent.
Right.
They didn't sit there, and as far as we know as of right now, they didn't cheat to get to an Elite Eight. They earned every step of the way. When Pitt was playing football under Coach Wannstedt, and they lost that Big East game to Cincinnati, which was one of the greatest games that I've ever seen and ever been at. Besides, I was at Clemson last year, but that game against Cincinnati for the Big East championship at Heinz Field in the snow, that was a great game.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
But to me, there wasn't cheating there.
Right.
So you know what? We may have not won, but we didn't cheat.
Right.
And that's what makes you kind of feel okay about where I'm not trying to say where the Pitt program is, but Pitt as a whole. We are what we are. Who we are, that type of deal.
I agree. I can't.
So we look at North Carolina State going forward. They are currently 5-1. They've played narrow loss opening night to South Carolina, 7-point loss. They beat our dear friend Brian King. Marshall Thundering Herd. I got a herd on. 37-20. They beat Furman 49-16. Beat Brian King's Florida State Seminoles 27-21. And beat Syracuse 33-25. And beat Louisville, number 17 in the nation at the time, 39-25. They've had an extra little rest for your Pitt Panthers here as they sit 5-1. Finley is your quarterback, grad transfer. They've had success this year with him. From Boise State, he's 158 completions for 223 attempts, 1,700 yards, 10 touchdowns. I believe he has zero, and I said 0 interceptions.
That's impressive.
On the year. It is impressive.
That's impressive.
You have Hines, leading rusher, 100 carries, 513 yards, 5 touchdowns. Harmon, 33 catches, 434 yards, 2 touchdowns.
That's impressive.
It's an impressive team.
This is Dave Doran's 5th season. And, it's funny, something that came up during the press conference this week, during the Narduzzi press conference, is he talked about, he basically gave kudos to the NC State program for sticking with him for that long and sticking with a guy for 5 years. It takes guts nowadays to do that. You just don't see it. But they're watching the fruits of their labor come to fruition right now at 5-1. One of the best teams in the nation. One of the best teams in the ACC by far. Well, not by far, but one of the best teams in the ACC. And I think Coach Narduzzi brought it up for a reason. And I know he has no reason to worry about his job by any stretch, but he brought it up for a reason, because season 3 is where you start to see strides, but you don't always. Pitt situation's a little different. And I think he brought it up by saying, hey, guess what? And the very next question that was brought up, he said, do you see your season, or do you see your, how it looks how things look right now at Pitt compared to the way they are at NC State, and he's like, well, yeah, he's like, you want to see, it would be a good program to mimic, basically, because, it's taken them 5 years, but they built a hell of a program in 5 years, and the fact that they've got seniors in place, he's got all his own players, bar none. And they're performing at a high level. Although this grad transfer thing is starting to get old across the board. As soon as a kid graduates, he's up and leaving.
This never used to be a thing. And all of a sudden now it is. It's like it started with North Carolina State and Russell Wilson going to Wisconsin.
Absolutely. And what's funny is Coach talked about this week, he joked, he says, it's not like a free agency, we can go out and get a new guy, but you can't. You can't get him this week, but you can get him next year. You got to get a new guy next year.
In terms of Pitt, I kind of look at it in two ways. If you had a team that was built to win this year, but you had no quarterback, going out and getting a Max Brown may have been a very good choice. Mm-hmm. But then I also look at it from the other side and saying, you had a very, very young team. Would it have been smart just to go with a younger guy and start from scratch? And with him coming in, I had higher expectations.
It lowers your expectations.
It does.
It lowers your expectations, so now you're not expected to win.
No. You think that you're getting a guy from USC. You would think that you have a higher probability of having a better season than if you would have started a Kenny Pickett from day one, and you would have had lower expectations, not because the team is not good, but because of the fact that the team is just young.
Right.
And again, I know people don't really like seeing the excuse of it's a young team, but I don't know. I think, like you said, I think that this is a good team to mimic. It's a good team to you have to give your coach time. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden now everyone's claiming for Narduzzi's head.
That's crazy.
I mean, the guy's in third year, and again, you're not playing with his players.
He won 8 games his first season with
ragtag lineup.
Exactly. Last year was probably one of the more talented teams he's going to have, but he still had holes in crazy places.
But let me stop you there. What is the key ingredient in all of this? What did he have? He had a quarterback.
2 seasons.
You're not going to win if you don't have a quarterback. And for 2 years, for the first year, he had a quarterback who stepped up. Mm-hmm. Last year, he had a quarterback who went in place. And so that's what I think that's basically, a lot of our problems this year is that the quarterback play has been okay. Last year in 2016, North Carolina State was 7-6.
Right.
So do you think that this year they thought that they would be 5-1 right now? No. I mean, that's
they hoped.
They had hoped, obviously, but that's not where they thought they would be. Right. A little bit more about North Carolina State on offense. They start one running back, an H-back, 2 wide receivers, and either a tight end or a third receiver. The depth chart reflects 12 starters to support their flexibility with the last starter. 471 total yards per game is tied with Clemson for 25th in the FBS with their 305.3 passing yards per game, serving as the team's relative strength. Obviously something to key on for Pitt. And obviously at this point, I think that Pitt's MVP is a shocking Dane Jackson. I think the kid's done a great job. Him and Avonte Maddox have really, really, really rebounded from last year.
It doesn't matter what happened in that Oklahoma State game. They were handcuffed no matter what happened. But the fact is, they've been your two better players from day one to now.
Yeah, they've been your most consistent players
from day one.
From day one,
obviously Jordan Whitehead's been your best player probably in the last 2 weeks. But the fact is, you didn't have him in the first 3 games, so it didn't matter.
No. That's been your strength pretty much all season. They rarely concede a turnover. They rank 3rd in the FBS with just 3 turnovers lost. Yep. So obviously, I think going forward as we get a little bit longer in the show, the key is going to be turnovers. Pitt needs to get a turnover somewhere, somehow, some way. In his second season as the Wolfpack's quarterback, Ryan Finley has become one of the more efficient passers in college football. Like I said before, he's a grad transfer from Boise State. He's completed 158 of 223 passes with 10 touchdowns, and he has done so without throwing a single interception, as we said before. Narduzzi labeled him on Monday as a very smart quarterback, calling attention to the player's mind over his physical attributes. He's done a great job at just managing the game, similar to an Alex Smith type quarterback. Managing the game and not really letting the ball get out of his.
We've seen what Alex Smith type players have done in the past. So
that's true, and he has a number of weapons in the passing game from which to choose.
And they got a running game.
But which his favorite is Jalen Samuels, who has 50 receptions to lead the team, and he's a tight end / H-back for the midseason All-American team.
Wow. So that leads us into what to expect to see this week. So give me some. I'll start. So I'm gonna throw out three keys, and then I'm gonna finish it off with a prediction, if that's okay, and that's how we'll run this final segment here. First off, I don't expect them to run. They have a really good defensive line. They're big and they're fast, and that is one of the strengths of their team. Coach talked about it all week. They don't do anything fancy. They just do it. They're a sound football team. So I don't expect Pitt to be able to run this week. I really don't. Or run with any effectiveness. So with that said, in order for Pitt to win, three things have to happen. One, Ben has to play the best game he's ever played. Obviously, he's not played a full game, but he's got to play at his very best. He's got to be able to complete passes downfield. He's got to be able to put air under the ball. This stuff where you throw a 35-yard pass, but it's a laser beam 6 yards off the turf. You just can't do it. I mean, and not expect that to be picked off. So that's one. He's got to play a really good game. The defense has got to keep him in a game. The defense has to hold NC State to field goals or limit the touchdowns. They have to keep them under 30. I'd say 32 points to have any chance at all. 30 points to have any chance at all. Because I do not see Pitt putting up more than 20, 24. I mean, 32's obviously that's a loss, but my point is they can't go higher than that. There's no way Pitt's putting up more than 24 or 30 points at best. So the defense has to keep them in field goals. And my third key is, God, I hate to sound like no, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say Weah has to make plays. He has to be the man on the outside. He has to bail DiNucci out. He has to be the guy who gives DiNucci confidence to throw the ball downfield. If we start the game and we is dropping the ball again, I don't want to say I'm going to turn the game off because I'm obviously not. But the fact is, if he's dropping the ball to start the game, that's normally a bad. That's a bad lead-in for him. That has been his MO every game that he's played poorly. He drops the first pass or the first couple passes. So those are my three keys. And this week, I honestly believe it's going to be a 31-13 game, NC State. I'm trying to go more. I know that's a downer, but I predicted a win every game.
So you need to go opposite?
Huh?
You need to predict a loss?
Thinking trying to reverse psychology. I think you're going to see Kenny Picket in the second half. I think you're going to see growing pains. I think you're going to see some nice passes, but I think you're going to see growing pains, and I think that's where the scores are going to come from is him. I don't think you're going to see anything from DiNucci.
All right. These are my
DiNucci fan.
You were. Now you're leaving the ship. You're jumping the ship.
Jumping the ship. Are you kidding me? Man,
I was a Max Brown fan. Now he's out. So now I'm Kenny Pickett fan.
We both are.
Sounds like a quarterback. Kenny Pickett on the pass.
It does.
Well, let's hope for good things. All right, these are my 3 turnovers. NC State does not make or does not
I didn't even bring it up.
produce many turnovers from the offensive standpoint.
Right.
Only 3 in 6 games. So whether
No
it's
interceptions.
a fumble or, you know what, though? You just brought up a good point. That's hidden vigorish. I've been waiting to use that term. Hidden vigorish. You know what? I'm calling an interception. And it's going to be either a Dane Jackson or an Avonte Maddox interception.
Well, keep
So
talking, because it's funny you bring that up.
So turnovers are key. My first key to the game. You need to get a turnover from either Avonte Maddox or Dane Jackson or anyone at this point. But I think a turnover is huge. They need to stop this offense. I think that, I said it before, North Carolina State's 5-1. I think they are due for a loss. First off, I think they're due for a loss. I think this is reality check time. They got some games coming up. They got Notre Dame on the road. They got Clemson at home, which could be a huge game in the ACC. But I think turnovers is going to play a big part in this game. I think Pitt needs to be plus in that category in order to win the game. My second one, quarterback play is going to be huge. Whether it's DiNucci for a little bit, whether it's Picket comes in, I think that the play combined from both of them needs to be positive. I think you are right. I think you're not going to see a touchdown pass from DiNucci. I do think you're going to see Picket in the second half. Maybe it leads them to a little comeback win, a little comeback victory for your Pitt Panthers on homecoming. But I think Picket plays a nice game. I think he does get some reps, but I think the overall quarterback play is going to be huge for this team going forward tomorrow. And my third, Pitt's facing a tough defensive line. Really tough defensive line. So I think the offensive line play is going to be huge. I think they need to contain their blocks. I think they need to stay on their blocks, whether it's a pass or a run play. I think they need to be A+ in that category. I also think the defensive line needs to come to play. I just don't think we've seen enough from either one, and I think both offensive and defensive line need to step up tomorrow and have a great game on both sides of the ball. So those are my 3 keys to the game. My prediction, I'm being optimistic here.
Here we go, optimism.
No, I just NC State, I don't know. I've heard all week 34-16. I don't know. I think that NC State is a good team. I think they've had some quality wins so far this year. I think they're just due for a loss. I don't think they're as good as they come out to claim they are. Pitt on homecoming, I think they have a great turnout for James Conner bobblehead night. I'm going to go last second field goal. Alex Kessman. He's had so much success on the road. He's had 0 at home. I think he gets a late field goal. I'm going to go 26-24. Your Pitt Panthers at home on homecoming. Write it down. Book it.
That's impressive.
I haven't seen enough from this North Carolina State team.
I get you.
I mean, they beat Louisville. Great win at home. It's a Thursday night. You know how those games go.
Oh, yeah.
Underdog always wins. I mean, I don't know. I think Pitt doesn't have a win against Power 5 at home. They play this week against North Carolina State. They play next week at Duke on the road. I don't know. They're just due for one. Whether it's DiNucci, whether it's a team effort, I just see it coming.
So
I just see it at 26-24. Kessman at the buzzer.
Kessman wins.
I just don't see that. I just don't see this team going to 2-5. And no one thought that North Carolina State would have been a tough game going ahead, and now it is. But I don't know. I'm going 26-24. At home.
You talked about turnovers earlier. It's funny you mentioned that. Pitt's had 11, caused 11 of them so far this year. It's a pretty good number halfway through the season. I mean, five or six of each, essentially. And I don't know if they can cause any this time around. I don't know. But is NC State due? They absolutely are. They are due to.
In my opinion, NC State's due for a loss. Pitt is due for a big win.
This would constitute that. This would constitute that. So, take your thing a step further. Do they win because Kenny Pickett comes in the game, or do they win because Ben?
Good question. I mean, seriously, that's a really good question. My heart tells me that how this game's going to go is North Carolina State's going to jump up 10-0, and I think that you're going to get 2 stalled drives by Pitt, not really moving the ball, not really any effort of moving the ball downfield, and I think you're going to see Narduzzi in panic mode. Yanks the cord and throws his guy in there. I mean, seriously, I think you're going to see him. I'm not trying to say Pickett has a great game, but I think he comes in, he does enough to win the game. And I think then from here on out, you're going to see Pickett in.
You know something? I hope you are correct.
I watched his senior year highlights of high school this past week, and he does put the ball right on the money.
Has he got arm strength?
His arm strength's above average. His speed is top notch. I'll say it like this, and no disrespect to Ben DiNucci. No disrespect, because I have been very down on him since this season started.
Yep.
And I do apologize for that. One of my favorite college football players of all time was Johnny Manziel. We all know that.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah, you did have.
I have a man crush on him. What I think you're going to get out of Kenny Pickett is you're getting a guy who can run. So, as far as in the running category, does he give you an upper leg on DiNucci? I think he's a faster Ben DiNucci, and he has a better arm than DiNucci. So, he's kind of Max Brown-esque, but more mobile. And that's where I draw the comparison to a Johnny Manziel. He can pass. He can run when needed. He adds the element of passing and running into his game. I think DiNucci can run. He can extend the play, but he can't pass down the field. And we've seen that over the last few weeks with Weah. When Weah had over 100 yards, Max Brown was a quarterback. When he catches one pass for 13 yards, Ben DiNucci's the quarterback. I don't know how well. I know he's fast, but I don't know how well Pickett can run in the open field. I've seen it on tape. It was a high school, but that's my opinion. I think that he ends up leading them to victory. I think he plays a big part. I think we see glimpses of him early, just like we saw when Peterman was here, and we saw Chad Voidick and Peterman switch series. So that's my thing. I'm saying 26-24. Pitt's due for a win at home. Power 5. They haven't had it all season. They're not going to fall to 2-5.
And nobody on the planet hopes that you're correct more than me. I have a hard time. I have a hard time fathoming that they're able to win the game without a running game. That's my only issue with this whole thing. I just don't see it. Tomorrow will be my first home game, that I will not be in the booth.
Womp womp womp.
I will not be in the booth.
Maybe they will win then.
Yeah, maybe. One of our great writers, Zach will be there. He was there. He was not there last week. I ended up writing. I ended up being the sole writer. I was there, and then I got down on the field too. So, which is pretty cool. And I think you saw me last. Was it last week?
I did. I saw you waving to me across the field up in the nosebleeds.
There you go. That's what it is.
Before we move on, Jason, I want to do one little thing different here since we've been in a little bit of a drag mode. We're going to do 4 picks. All right, we predicted the Pitt game. Texas Tech, number 24 in the nation, at West Virginia, high noon.
What's the spread?
West Virginia favored 3.5.
Texas Tech wins. It's at West Virginia. Texas Tech wins.
All right, I'm going West Virginia.
It's fine.
Okay.
I just can't pick the Mountaineers. Go ahead.
Can't pick the Mountaineers. We're doing the Red River Shootout. Number 12, Oklahoma
beats
at Texas.
Oklahoma beats Texas.
Oklahoma favored 9.5.
Ooh. If we're picking the spread, Oklahoma just lost too. Oklahoma wins at and covers.
I'm going to Oklahoma. The points, the spread, all.
Tough to go against it.
Bring it back to the ACC. Georgia Tech 3-1 at number 11 Miami 4-0.
Georgia, where's it at?
Miami's favored 6.5.
Where's it at?
Miami.
Georgia Tech wins that game.
I'm going Georgia Tech as well. And then for the big one, let's see.
6.5, you said?
Yep, 6.5.
Georgia Tech wins a game but doesn't cover the spread. Go ahead.
And then we're going, let's see here. Let's pick a good one here. Utah 4-1 at USC number 13, 5-1. USC's favorite 13.
At USC? USC wins a game. Utah doesn't stay in it.
I'm taking Juju Smith's alma mater, USC, and the points. They win by 14.
Oh yeah, I can see that. And let's cover one more thing before we leave.
Wait, we got to find out. Here's a good one. The last one. The old famous Kansas Jayhawks. 1-4 in the season at Iowa State. 3-2. Iowa State's favored 22.5.
Iowa State wins that game by 60. Or by 50.
I'm going Iowa State too. Go Cyclones.
Iowa State's got a pretty good team. It's an interesting.
Coming off the win against at Norman.
Yep.
Against Oklahoma.
Leave you with this. I was, and of course we're in Pittsburgh, so it's okay to cover the Steelers a little bit here. So I'm listening to one of our I say favorite, and I mean that in jest. The Fan Afternoon, which is Muller and Starkey and Muller decided to plan out the rest of the Steelers season for us all, which was nice of them. Steelers coming off a horrific loss where Ben played just the worst game, what could have been the worst game of his career. And he's played poorly now 7, 8, 12 games in a row. And over the last 12 games, he's thrown 16 interceptions, including all those for last week. So they determined that over the remainder of the season, the Steelers are going to go 8-3. They're 3-2 right now. They just got hammered at home. Their starting quarterback hasn't played well in 12 games that we've talked about. Hasn't played above average in 12 games. The the defense can't stop the run, and they're predicting an 8-3 finish. So I tweeted out, if that's not optimism, I don't know what is. I don't see
Their optimism is like my Pitt optimism.
It's totally.
I can't predict this team to lose.
I understand. And you know what's funny?
Because every week, seriously, this is the way I look at it. This team,
there is reason
they have
to think
beatable,
they will win.
But they have beatable opponents.
Absolutely.
Like, this is not a losable game. It's a winnable game.
It is a winnable game.
Just like next week when we are previewing Duke on the road.
Right.
It's a winnable game. They come back to play Virginia.
And
it's a winnable game.
And there's talent on the team.
There's no game that I can sit here and say there's a loss. That's why I'm not trying to say that they're going to finish 6-0 in the second half of the season to go 8-4. But I can't say that.
Okay.
I can't say that. They've gone to Blacksburg and they've had luck.
Mm-hmm.
Miami coming up here and on Black Friday in the middle of winter, I don't have faith in Miami. There's not one game here that I don't have faith that I could sit here and say Pitt is going to lose that game. I don't.
Yeah, it's for me. It's all dependent on quarterback play.
When you tell me that their last 6 games are against North Carolina State, winnable game, Duke, winnable game, Virginia, winnable game, North Carolina, winnable game, Virginia Tech, they've had success, winnable game, and Miami, winnable game. I mean, none of those games put fear in my eyes, to be honest with you. Now, they might finish 2-4. I don't know. They don't put
That would be so disappointing.
They don't put fear in my eyes.
4-8 would be
I mean,
tragic.
seriously, what game there, besides the last two, Virginia Tech and Miami, put fear in your eyes? None of them. They're all winnable games.
I don't. You are way more optimistic than me.
The way I look at it is we would have had a 12-0 season.
You know, it's funny. 5-12. Or 5-7.
13-0 the bowl game.
5-7.
National champs.
I don't see three more. I see at best 3 more wins. But that's if things stay status quo, which you don't know.
Kenny Picket, baby.
Kenny Picket. And let's finish up with the Arsenal Cider House. Once again, it's where we come live from each and every week in the South Hills. Fantastic location. It's been packed all night. People have been rolling in and rolling out. It is autumn. It's Autumn Fest out here at Trax Farms. There is 7 or 8 great options on tap every week. Picket Bone Dry, Fighting Alec, Archibald's Ado, Negley's Nectar, which is your 4 that seem to always be here, and then it's your Colonel Symptom Sour Cherry. This is their second, third, fourth week of that. They got a brand new one, a Dry Riesling, which is in the ice cream machine, in the sorbet machine this week. So they got a Riesling in the sorbet machine, which is interesting. It's got a really sweet start, and it kind of finishes a little not as sweet. So it's interesting. It's really, really good. They got a rhubarb, Ramrod's rhubarb, which is, I think, is a tremendous flavor. And then, of course, the Honeycrisp apple, which is which you can only get by glass right now. So if you haven't had a chance, please come on out. Arsenal Cider House, 3 great locations: Sorgel Farms, Lawrenceville, and of course the Trax Farm location. For Zach Kaminsky, this is Jason Avelko. We appreciate you listening. Dial in next week when we get to talk about hopefully a Pitt win and preview another great week. We appreciate you listening. Hail to Pitt.
Hail to Pitt.